I got a heat stroke. This was 2 weeks ago. Frankly, it was a huge surprise because I've lived in Asia for 22 years now. It's never happened before. This is my story. This is what happened, and more importantly, this is what you can do to make sure it never happens to you. Let's get started. The ride was pretty straightforward. It was 120 kilometres from my home here in Nakhon Ratchasima to Pak Chong. There was supposed to be no elevation involved whatsoever, and as you can see from this clip, I set off pretty enthusiastic about the day. It's late November here in Thailand, and the conditions for riding, they couldn't be more perfect. 25 degrees, very light wind, clear skies, no pollution. So early on in the ride, everything looked very positive, but even at this point, I'd already made a crucial mistake. Before I'd even left the house, I'd had 2 cups of tea, which amounted to 600 ml of fluid. I thought that was actually fine. However, if you read the US and UK government guidelines, what I should have done was have 500 ml of water 2 hours before I left the house, and then a further 300 ml just before I left the house. I didn't do this, which meant I was already about 30–40% down on what I should have drank before I even set off. Now let's move on. The next significant event was about 20 kilometres into the ride. Unfortunately, I had a puncture. These things do happen. The good news though was I was right outside a gas station, so I pulled in there, quickly finished the puncture, and I thought, okay, what the hell, it's early on, but I'm going to treat myself, have a cup of coffee. So went into the coffee shop, treated myself to a nice cappuccino, which was about another 200–250 ml of fluid. In theory, I should be okay here, but another mistake was that to this point I'd not even had a sip of water. Now, I think that's because the way I've actually configured my bikepacking bags, and what I've done is I've put on a frame bag which has taken away the access to put on 2 mounts where I can store water bottles. This is bad for a couple of reasons, because firstly it makes getting access to the bottle of water difficult in the first instance, but also trying to unscrew that cap and then take a sip of water while you're actually riding along, that's difficult as well. Now, the UK and US governments say that taking sips of water regularly is really important, and if you don't, it's bad. How bad? It's really bad, because what I should have been doing was taking regular sips of water at least every 15 minutes and consuming a full 1 litre of fluid every hour. That's when temperatures are at 30 degrees centigrade. Ups indeed, because that means at this point I would already have been down 800 ml on the fluid I should have consumed on the road. When you add in the 200 ml that I'd not taken before I left the house, I'm a litre down. The next significant event, that comes when I'm around 40 k's down the road and I've run out of water. Not a good thing, but I pop into 7-Eleven and top up. I start to drink that, I'm on the road again, but I'm another 400 ml in deficit. That's bringing it all up to 1.4 litres at this point. What's even worse is that I only bought 1 bottle. That's not a great start. It's not a sensible thing to do. And again, I put that down to the fact of I've really got my water carrying setup all wrong with the bike packing setup. Now this clip shows that the temperatures are running at close to 34 degrees, and according to UK US government guidelines I should have upped my intake to 1.25 litres from 1 litre, and I'm not doing that, so I'm pushing myself deeper and deeper into a hole here. Shortly after midday I find myself a great little spot for lunch, a nice shaded area, and I'd also had the common sense to buy some more water since my stop at 7-Eleven, so that's a positive at least. I don't do everything wrong, and I don't want you to get the impression that I'm not aware of how to stay hydrated, or at least I thought I did. But clearly, as you'll see towards the end of this video, I got a lot of things wrong. However, at the break, when I had lunch, there's a couple of things I did get right. The first thing is I realised that I needed to take some electrolytes, that water wasn't going to be enough, and I think that's a great strategy for anyone. I brought an electrolyte pack. In fact, I bought a few sachets from home. I took one of those, which is a very good move. The other good thing I did was that I reapplied sunscreen, and also I put like a neck gaiter over my neck to protect myself from the sun. So there were a few good things that I did do. But it's just getting worse and worse, because I calculate at this point in the ride I should have consumed 4.25 litres of fluid, but my total fluid intake was around 2 litres, which just clearly not enough. In this next clip, I stopped to get water, and I'm around 80 kilometres into the ride, 6 hours. I should have drunk between 6 to 6.5 litres of water to keep myself safe. All I'd had was 2.6 litres of water. That's so short of where I needed to be. From this point in, things just got worse. In fact, things get a lot worse, because I find out my intended route was just not possible. I had to make a huge detour, which involved a 400-metre climb. I'd not factored this in, and this was going to be a pretty tough climb, because it was only over the space of around 10 kilometres. Undoubtedly, I was already dehydrated at this point, and as I started to make my way up the hill, I realised again I'd run out of water. Crazily, and this was maybe the worst mistake I made, I thought, oh, I'll just carry on, there'll be some kind of shop or something on the way, I'll get water at the next place. There was no next place. After about 40 minutes going to the climb, I felt completely and utterly exhausted. I couldn't go on. So I stopped, I crossed the road, I put my bike in like a drainage ditch, and I had to lie in the shade there thinking, I don't think I can get up this climb. There's another 20 minutes, half hour to go. I haven't got the energy. I realised I hadn't got any water, so what was I going to do? And I thought, okay, I'll eat as much fruit as I can. Luckily, I brought some from home. I had a banana, 2 oranges and an apple. I laid in this ditch for maybe 10-15 minutes, got some energy back, and then carried on for 10 minutes, and thank goodness I came across this shop where I bought a 1.5 litre bottle of water and 3 400ml bottle of Coke. I rested there for about half an hour, and I did feel a lot better once I'd had the Coke and some water, but the damage was really well and truly done at this point. I carried on the climb, got to the top of the hill in about another 20 minutes, and then onto this. That was a really vicious climb. I'm running super late now. I should crack on to Pak Chong, but I think I've deserved to sit back, look at this view, and have another cup of coffee. Tell me what you think. £100 for the coffee, but the view absolutely priceless. If you've got any doubts at all about the authenticity of this article, and you really should have, take a look at this one instead. It's written by a professor who's worked at Harvard, Stanford, MIT, and he really knows what he's talking about. A lot of letters after his name, and he dispels the myth about the link between coffee, tea and dehydration unless you're taking them in fairly large doses, which is about 6 cups coffee or 9 cups of tea per day. As for me, after enjoying the views, which were spectacular, I make my way to Pak Chong and I get there after about another hour. At that point, I've only consumed a little under 5 litres, where really I should have had between 10 to 11 litres. To put it bluntly, I got my facts wrong. I thought I was doing everything right to prevent heat exhaustion and heat stroke, but that was just not the case. So why did I get the numbers so wrong? That's because I took my advice from the wrong places, and I actually thought that 500 mils of water every hour was absolutely fine. If you look at this piece of text here and look under stay consistent, you can see that that's what it's advising. There's no reference to temperature here, and just for the point of clarity, this was taken from the same article that was saying that coffee and tea dehydrates you and you shouldn't drink it at all. So according to this article, I was doing everything right, and I'm not picking on this article because there's so many that say exactly the same thing, but it's absolutely wrong. Now look at this and compare the advice from the US Customs and Protection Agency. They recommend you should be taking 32 ounces of fluid per hour. Additionally, you could refer to this article from the UK Ministry of Defence, and they recommend you should take up to a litre of fluids in temperatures of around 30 degrees centigrade. All of this is fantastic advice, but for me, in my hotel room, it was all too late and my physical condition was deteriorating quite quickly. Over the next couple of hours, I managed to drink 1.5 litres of water. I had a Gatorade, some more electrolytes, but I became increasingly sick. Now the table here shows the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke. The symptoms, fortunately, that I was experiencing were mainly in the heat exhaustion category, and these included tiredness, headache, feeling sick, heat rash, fast breathing and weakness. With these kind of symptoms, the thing to do is to stay in a cool place for 30 minutes, try and recuperate, keep on sipping water regularly and also taking electrolyte drinks. Now this is what I did, but after 30 minutes I still didn't feel too well, and if you look at the table here, I did experience a couple of the symptoms from the heat stroke category. They included not feeling well after 30 minutes and also having fast breathing. Probably the most sensible thing to do in hindsight would be to seek medical advice. I think I was sufficiently dehydrated. I probably needed to have an intravenous strip just to get myself hydrated again. I chose to manage my symptoms in the hotel. Unfortunately, after a couple of hours, things did slowly start to get a little bit better. I wouldn't advise you to do this because as soon as you get any of those symptoms in the heat stroke category, I think you need to seek help. And in fact, online, there are plenty of people say even with heat exhaustion, it's always best to seek medical attention. This has been a pretty long explanation, but I think it's so important because if I can get caught out after living in Asia for 22 years, it's very easy for anyone to get caught out. It's harder to manage when you get older, so that's also something to keep in mind. But regardless, you have to be very, very careful and drink a lot more than you think, as well as taking electrolyte drinks and taking regular rests out of the heat and in air conditioning if you can. Now, I also think that part of this problem was down to poor equipment choices, and I have made changes to my bike. And if you take a look at what I've done here, I've added a couple of mounts onto my front forks, and that should make it a lot easier for me to take water in the future when I'm on tour. Finally, don't get caught out like I did, and don't believe everything you read on the internet. Take your information from the US and UK official sources and you'll be fine. That's all for today. Take care.